I drew a bunch of people together who were interested in the same types of themes in their artwork, and it was trying to create a dialogue, based on that. All the pieces in this show I asked to be language-based, either in the form of text or speech. And having that as a starting point brings up a conversation or a dialogue. And the act of responding to something and then repeating something, a lot of the pieces are in form of a takeaway, so they're multiples. And so people can either take the piece away, or perhaps it's a text piece that asks a question. There's this kind of act of generosity that I'm kind of going for, where it's not about the individual artwork or the individual artist, but about the whole group, and about being a little bit more free and loose with the work. So it's not this kind of precious object, but it's ephemeral, and multiple people can be a part of it and experience it at the same time.
I have the newspaper pieces that are cut are actual pieces. I consider them pieces as well. But then when I got a residency at the Lower East Side print shop, keyholder residency, they were like, oh, you can use these as negatives for silk screens. And then that sort of just started this whole other project. When I printed them and I started seeing these squares, I just felt like, oh, these have to be interpreted as, they looked like musical notes to me.
Poor and burning, NATO blunder, insights Afghans, distrust and fury grow.
The squares that are here are where I'm erasing the pull quotes and headlines that are from these particular articles. So I've removed everything else. And kind of created a uniform grid except for those pull quotes that come from that specific story, the Koran burning story. So I thought, why not just use the genius of somebody creating these headlines to then create the lyrics.
It's part of a studio practice I have of typing on a manual typewriter. I think of it as a kind of drawing practice. Usually I use language, and very often I'm listening to the radio as I'm doing it, so just capturing words as they go by. I had a notion to try to do that same sort of listening practice, but not with words, but with ambient sounds. Outside the window, there's a soccer field in between the avenue there, and there's a basketball court, and there's a school where kids are yelling, and there's cars idling underneath. And that whole sort of panoply of sound became what I was trying to capture and transcribe with the typewriter. There's a fairly limited vocabulary to deal with things like pitch or the distance of the sound from the hearer. There's a little bit of volume. I use sort of all caps for loud sounds and parentheses for things that are far away. But I think a deeper language could be developed to kind of try to capture more aspects of the sound. So that's sort of the next step.
An ensemble or a group of people ponder together the question, what do we do now? And then they decide, after they go through that process, they then decide whether they'd like to enact one or more of those choices. We just set some ground rules, which were arbitrary. Then we proceeded to see how people would react to that form of group decision-making process, and it could have gone a lot quicker. We could have come to impasse. We could have had a lot more disagreement. Anything could have happened. There's both spoken, and there's also a lot of unspoken ways that decisions are made, and some of them are through habit, some of them are through power dynamics of a group, some of them are through a shared history and kind of skirting over issues. And so it's a different kind of thing when you maybe speak up for yourself and maybe are given permission to have an opinion.
My work in this show is called Performance Strike, and it comes out of an action that I did on May Day that was a global musician strike called We're Not Performing. And during that action, I came up with the slogan, I am not performing. And so I inserted it as something between an art object and a conceptual, political statement that has some resonance along with or against participatory art. Where there is antithesis, there is resonance and relevance as well. So I think it's important to have contradiction.
With the show being in such a small space and being called the Soapbox Gallery, it was kind of perfect to play off of that and have this very tight, intimate space with a bunch of work inside of it.